Where's out? Out. Okay.
What's this class about?
About. Well, it's supposed to be about articulation, but you know, it can be about whatever we want it to be. Is articulation the kind of thing we want to talk about?
I think the original idea is articulation / design point / you know, how do you approach the project? What are you thinking about before you design things?
Yeah, okay,
And then later
yeah,
we'll
like
make
it
it hit
says.
something with a hammer.
Like
But
it says, what I thought I would do in the absence of like a lesson plan or a clue, was to see like what people wanted to talk about, and then we'd like start talking about it, and maybe I'd like go off on a tangent, maybe we'd have another question in a bit, and you know, so somebody want to just like try and get me started?
Well, you know,
Let's talk about articulation.
I'm interested here with these people in hearing what you have figured out from looking at the real thing. I hate to say I'm looking for rules, but observations about, you know, I guess in part it's why isn't the crappy SCA armor right? But that's only, I say that only because it provides a counterpoint.
Okay.
what
The
is
short
right?
answer why crappy SCA armor isn't right, or why it isn't made correctly, is people are too easily satisfied that the thing that they have made with their own two hands and they love dearly like a mother loves its child really is the thing in the picture, whereas the meanest observer could say that they are very different indeed. So in that sense, the answer to the question is make it more like the real thing. Damn it.
So and in that spirit, having spent years and years and years looking at the real thing and trying to figure out what I'm seeing, I'm interested in what you're seeing.
Okay. Do we want to compare and contrast the SCA take on something?
I don't care about the SCAT. That was just a
Okay.
rhetorical
Can I put a
device.
slightly different twist
Yeah,
on
sure.
that question?
Okay.
How do we make it easier to make stuff closer to the real thing?
Yeah,
Because a major issue for most people in the SCA is without having access to the real thing, it's hard to know what you're looking at.
Okay.
So for something concrete to talk about, how do we taper an articulation so that, you know, for a Gothic knee joint, the joint comes in and out. So the outer flare lamination, the outer laminations are actually larger than the inner laminations, which is complete opposite to most of what you'll see in an SCA reproduction.
Well, that's a large preface there. The short, a couple of answers to it, addressing several points. One is about whether or not I've like looked at a lot of real material. I've looked at a lot of pictures. I haven't really looked at that much real material. I mean, when you get right down to it, I have not looked at that much real material. You know, I look at pictures. And you can tell a lot from pictures. Now, as we were discussing earlier, and you know, we too were discussing earlier, you know, people's brains are different about what they can get out of pictures. You know, whether or not that picture, in some sense, in your brain translates into a three-dimensional object, and you can move it around in your head to some extent. Some folks can do that. Some folks can't do that. I can do that. So you know, there's my mutant ability. One of my mutant abilities. Specifically on those legs, if I understood you correctly, you're saying if we call this lane 1 and this lane 2, you're saying that lane 2 should be bigger than lane 1?
If you
Just not so, sir.
okay, so
It fans out wider this way, but
yes,
but that doesn't make it bigger. Doesn't make it longer. You just twist the ends out a little, if you will. I mean, not quite so simple as that, but nearly.
okay, but if it's
But when you do twist the ends out a little bit, if you twist the ends out of a, who's got these cardboard? No, these cardboard, thanks. Because I'm going to twist it. Can I cut this?
Yeah, you want scissors?
Please.
Oh, here's some big cheese.
wow,
Right.
my eyes.
Grazie. All right, so
pull that out your pocket left?
You know, let's say for a moment that this is an E-lame. And it ain't, but, you know, let us say that it's an E-lame.
Oh, it's not more like what a knee lane looks like, thank you. Complete with all the funny little bumps. Knee lanes need funny little bumps. 16th century leave all the
Okay.
but
You know, let's say that's an E-lame, and
I bet you see some interest too.
if it doesn't look like an E-lame to you, we'll discuss why that is in a bit. But let's say that's an E-lame. All right, so it's going to fit here. When we twist these out a little bit, it changes the overall shape. So if we are gonna have that upper one twisted out, maybe we need to alter that shape to accommodate that. But we don't need to alter it very much. Almost more in theory than in fact, because the amount that it would have to flare to fit. Do we have some people like? Some people with shorts who wants to be the leg model. Stand on the chair. Thank you. Mike off the shorts. Thank you.
You don't have to have a right leg.
Well, at the moment this is
Tiffany up there?
a generic.
I got jeans on today.
The amount that actually flares out is not very much. You know, it's, how close is it to parallel? It's not that, you know, and the amount that it deviates is only very, the amount that it deviates from a cylinder or a portion of a cylinder is not very great, and it's confined mostly to the end. So, in fact, the difference I was speaking of is more theoretical than real in most cases.
Sorry, man.
I may call upon you later.
Right, you're free.
Can I give you my number? So, yeah, so is this a right or left? Okay, I put it on that side, but you know, at the moment, it's kind of neither way. Now it's definitely something.
Oops, it's a right.
You know, but this is too asymmetrical. Let me just snip a little away here.
He's a very precise guy. How are you doing that trimming? I grind it
Okay.
off.
So there's a perfectly good looking lane, yes? No, in fact, somebody bring on it. Somebody's gonna bring on it.
We have the Whitney punch, I see.
had a hole puncher?
A whole
I wasn't able to find a.
Oh, you weren't able to score one? Okay.
But the Whitney punch will do in a pinch.
Yeah, I'm sure will.
It's a knockoff Whitney punch, so I don't care if it gets used in
Cardboard won't hurt it. Trust it. I mean, cardboard is candy for those things. It's okay. They like cardboard. Now it's become, if it is an upper lane, it's become a left. Why? Because this is straight up and down now, right? Because the inside of the leg is probably a straight line. Probably. That's the default thing. The outside's curving back. Why is it? That's coming back. Why is it coming back? So it can stay underneath the wing. This is at variance with SCA armor we have all seen, right? Where, you know, there's a thing the size of a baguette loaf you can jam you know, between the wing and the knee. The lane should stay under the wing. Now, wherever I put that pivot there. It's following the edge of that overlap where the wing is. Does it have to be there? No, it could be somewhere else. It could be hiding under the wing, but then it's hard to work with. It could be way out in front. Well, then it's not symmetrical inside to outside. Well, who cares? It's okay. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. You know, symmetry is really overrated in these joints. It alters your mathematical geometry, oh my God, and in fact, as it flexes, there'll be half a degree of twist. It doesn't matter, or more. It doesn't matter. It's okay. It's just okay. It's all right.
It's more how they fit to each other.
It's just okay. It just doesn't matter if that twists.
There's a leg right there that isn't straight.
Close.
We got one right there. This one, the lanes don't like it. I mean, they're closer than 180, but they're not.
Yeah, no, these hardly line up at all. These are much deeper on this side than they are on that side. But it really just doesn't matter. It's just okay.
Well, and what you
As long
just
as
said
it's
is
not-
funny, right? You said it's longer on the inside than the outside, because they put the wings sort of farther in. so they jacked everything in a weird way.
Yeah, they did, so, yeah, you could think of it as,
So
you
the
know,
side that you would think is longer is in fact shorter, and the one
Yeah.
you think is shorter is longer. And they're not parallel, the sides are not parallel to each other.
Symmetrical.
And
and
it bends.
it just goes on, but yet it still works, you know, and, you know, this is nothing like a straight line, right? It's a little bulgy right here, but you know, hey, so is your knee. Your knee is.
Need
You're done working for that dollar yet.
No, other knee, just for choice, yeah.
We've seen the other one already.
This bulge right here is frequently reflected in real knee armor. You got to accommodate this. This is bony. This won't just get shoved out of the way. But you want it to fit nice and slim and trim. Again, in direct opposite to the skating knees we've all seen. We want this to be as close as possible. So it should hug this, and then maybe reflects a little bit at the bottom. Sometimes you'll even see that these guys are, even tangents through the rivet holes are not parallel, but the medial part of the cop is actually sort of twisted in this way, right? So it hugs the knee a little bit tighter, and then reflects it back out. And on the outside, you see that it's flatter. We have the part where we have layers piled on layers, and that builds up some thickness. But on some real ones, you see that they've done their best to negate that and make this flat or even vaguely concave from here to here, which is, my God, just like a leg.
Like the Tyrrell armor.
Oh yeah,
You've
that's
got
very
that beautiful
clean,
shape.
very clean. So it should reflect the anatomy. It should be close to the anatomy. Now, does this violate the mechanics? Well, yeah, but within such small amounts, it just doesn't matter. It still works. The other thing that we see in our venerable stage in these is this tremendous depth front to back. The plain fact is that the deeper you make an articulated joint from front to back, if you will, the more overlap the lanes have to give it a certain amount of deflection in terms of degrees, let us say. And you quickly run into a situation where, in order to get a reasonable amount of deflection, not even like the crazy amount of deflection which seems to be desirable, but to get a reasonable amount of deflection, you have to have more overlap than can possibly happen. The other thing which happens is if the, let me go back. There's the mechanical thing where the overlap has to be too great to get the degree of flexion. The other thing is, you would like in an ideal universe for the neutral axis of this joint, right? If we imagine, you know, a neutral axis through which this moves, we'd like that to line up with the neutral axis of the organic joint. If the axis of the mechanical joint is behind the organic joint, when you flex your leg, the armor will get too long. It'll fall down onto your shin. It'll go slack up here. It gains in length. If it's too shallow, it loses length and it pulls this way. In the real stuff, it's pretty close to that ideal.
So does that imply that the rivets should be in line with the actual organic joint?
Well,
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. I mean, and that axis is right here, more or less. It changes as you do this because it doesn't really roll, you know, perfectly. It actually moves back slightly, and moves back more when you consider that the patella descends into the joint as the, you know, as the tibia rolls, or the femur rolls back on the tibia. But somewhere in this region is where the joint is. Now, look at the shape of this at this point. Stand up. Look at the shape of this at this point. No, stand right up. Okay, so if this is the axis through this joint, have we gotten to 180 degrees around? Are these guys parallel to each other at this point? No, they're nowhere near it. They're diverging. Behold, they're diverging. They're diverging quite strongly. Does that throw a wrench in like the mechanics of the thing? A little bit, but doesn't matter? No, it's all right. It's okay.
It's follow the tendons.
Pardon me?
It's almost following the tendons.
Well,
Rather than, you know, just the axis, can we line this up and say if it goes right, it goes exactly along where your tendons line on each side?
I don't think I
Do we
would
wanna
try
jump
for that.
that far?
I wouldn't try for that particular
Okay.
thing. But I would say in general that most modern armorers make their knee cups and thus their knees that follow too damn deep.
Yeah.
They should be tight, close, and shallow.
Right.
Shallow lets you get more motion for less overlap. Shallow makes it, shallow within reason, makes it follow where the organic joint is. And all of these allow for comfortable wear and a tight, sexy fit. And like tight, sexy fit is everything.
Don't need to put those like basketball knee pads, for God's sake.
And even the guys who don't put on, they got these big wallowing knees. And if you look at pictures, and this comes back to look at pictures. Those knees on those pictures are of real armor. They're slim. They're slim and trim. And
Well, they
slim-
do this.
Well,
And the SCA knees do this.
well,
right, but they're slim, and they function better when they're slim. They don't catch on things. They flatter the wearer.
You don't have to walk like you're a
You
sumo
don't,
wrestler.
you don't have to walk like you're a sumo wrestler, how many times have we seen guys, with these knees, wearing knees that would fit on this fella? All the time. And, on the personal circuit, yes, you need bigger knees than he does.
Yes, I do, I know it.
And, the average SCA size medium is what you really need in a real knee.
Yeah.
Because the SCA size medium is a real size large and a half.
Are we also looking at the fact that SCA requirements require padding? And
No, they don't.
some of
No, they
this-
They don't.
Not if you're a dude.
Not,
For 12 years or better.
all right, I'm back in my cave now. I'll back up quietly.
I think
okay, they often write
rules.
rules that say hard over soft. By the time you put a steel leg on, doesn't
I
matter.
think part of what's going on there too is that if you aren't very good at making legs, you aren't very good at making articulation, something big and sloppy
Well,
at least
it
appears to work
appears
better.
to work.
It appears to work. Yeah, it
In fact, does
really.
not.
I'm
But
not
only
making
appears
the
to.
claim that it
Yes.
does.
Yeah, you picked the right word.
Yeah.
We'll let you get away with that one. Appears.
So, back to this question about these whether these joints line up in a straight line. Have we all looked at this before? Are we convinced in our minds that the real ones just didn't do that? Do we need to labor that point any further? Like I say, it does create some mechanical difficulties when this is flexed. These corners want to dig in unless they're rolled in just a little bit, but that's not a hardship.
You notice the lanes on the wing side were quite long.
Yeah, they are. They're longer than they need to be because this guy was like working fast. He just hacked it out, and he could have come back and trimmed that, but what the hell? He used the same template for the upper and the lower, or maybe this had a wrapping plate, and that would
Yeah, I don't think
that would fill in better. But in any case, it's certainly very secure. You're not going to slip anything in there. This is
Except itself.
what's that?
Except itself.
Except
There's no point
itself.
sticking into you, but.
Yeah, I'm right.
Yeah, there's.
Yes, this is nasty work. If I built this, it would look cleaner inside, and that's because I'm overthinking this.
I wish I could make it so.
If you had to make them in those quantities,
Yeah, if I had to make those in those quantities and get paid by the piece or whatever, yeah.
So how much, you talked about the range of motion,
Yeah,
obviously the
yeah,
real ones are less than.
This is really marginal even
Right.
for a real one.
just
Ever so
90.
slightly past 90 degrees, and in this case,
Just.
just barely past the vertical.
181.
Yeah, 181. Yeah, about 184
Stand up,
5 would be
position,
nicer.
Okay, look at the angle between here and here.
Yeah.
The articulated knee has to accommodate that. This,
some people don't have negative articulation there, but mostly.
I've never met one.
Yeah,
Never met
I
one.
have.
You? Okay.
May have been broken.
Yeah, okay,
Some
and
people which.
the human being is, like all other organisms, is subject to a lot of variation, one way and another. But it needs to accommodate that. This just barely accommodates that. It digs in there a little bit, but these are
Those are
cheesy.
those are cheesy.
These are cheesy.
Well, those are high-end cheese because they're decorated and pretty. And those do not have a long demi-greave coming down that has to sit flush. And they don't have a strap running around the back
Right, they
that's
just
supposed to
got
strap to the
a
thing.
turning pin
They-
here to the greave.
they have a
There's a
logger
certain
on
amount of
the greave.
slop that can happen there, and no doubt this armor is just relying on that idea, there should be a certain amount of slop. But it has to accommodate this hyper extension to be comfortable, otherwise that demi-greave jams into your shin, or you should be wearing a greave anyway, but if you're wearing a greave, it won't sit close, it'll sort of jack itself, demi-greave will jack itself away from the greave and look like shit. So that has to, I shouldn't be vulgar, I'm being recorded, right? Pardon me.
Yeah, don't worry.
Can we strike that last comment?
I went way past that. You'll sound good compared to me.
Thank you. Thank you. I just set the tenor for me. So how much does it flex in the other direction? This is where the modern practitioner and the medieval are going to be at odds. A real piece of leg armor flexes this far. That's it. This is how far you can lift your leg with your muscles alone and not like compress it under the weight of your body. When you just lift your leg like this, that's the amount you can cover. That's how much a real leg bends, a real articulated leg. And there's a couple of reasons why this is so, but let's take the cheap as one of them for just a moment. I mean, there's always compromises in armor design. You're compromising protection versus wearability. There's no doubt that if your leg could flex this far and remain armored, it would be more comfortable to wear. On the other hand, leg mount, sort of stand this time, so we're gonna, okay, so now, pull that up. Okay, yeah, bring your leg up to that point I was speaking of. Okay, we are now in contact, skin to skin from here to here, leg down. Okay, so that means we need this much to be open, if his armor fits like a skin, which of course it doesn't. Now, if we take this all the way up to here, we are now in skin-to-skin contact from here to here.
Back.
That's now that's 14 inches of opening.
Yeah.
That's not acceptable. That's not armor anymore. So this is the kind of thing we're sort of working against. Yeah, the one would be more comfortable to wear, but the other one, the back of your leg is naked. And thus it is, say with an elbow as well, right? This is how far the arm moves comfortably. Yes, I can push it to here. Some people can let their arms just dangle to here.
Or open there to there.
Yeah, right. So, if we go from here to here, we've only got, 5 inches of opening. We go from here to here, we got, 12 inches of opening. That's crazy. That's not defense anymore. And that's presuming the armor fits like a skin, which of course it can't. It's good, it's a shell. It's always going to be distant from the skin in some sense. So that's the thing. Was that addressing your question?
Yes.
Okay, I lost track of the scope of your question. Is there more to it?
That was, you did fine.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, there's always this balance. Do we see why that looks like a good lane pattern? Does that make sense to people, or does that does it seem foreign? Anybody think that doesn't look like a lane?
Very familiar to me.
How do you determine the depth of these extra loops on the sides? I mean, it's extra margin for those rivet holes, right?
Yeah, it's meat around the rivet holes and cutting away what's not necessary. You could just as easily eliminate those. No, I got one here. Oops. And this idea of tracing a template with a template, we're all used to this, right? We do this all the time. Okay. It gets bigger every time, and periodically you got to pare it down. But functionally, this is the same thing.
Yeah. I've started
Yeah.
scanning my patterns in and working with them in an art program, so I don't do that.
Oh, so they don't get
I
bigger and
take
bigger
my
every time?
observations, go back.
Yeah, I try to keep, if I go several generations from a template, I keep the original so I can fall back to something, okay, I can eliminate 3 line widths or whatever. But this is functionally the same, but when this is flexed, these guys here this guy here will come to scrape a little sooner than this area here. And if you cut that away, you can get a little bit more motion.
Tighter joint.
You get a tighter articulation. It's just a little easier to build.
And there seems
Can
to
I
be.
sidetrack briefly into templates?
Sure.
When I have a working template, 30 thou brass. Cut it flat in 30 thou brass. If it's brass, I know this is one of my good ones that's proven. If it's paper, it's a prototype.
I don't own a template that's worth turning to brass.
And
You know,
I don't.
it depends what you're doing.
but
If you're,
again, we
if
do
you're,
things different ways.
well, no,
Your
it's about your goals. If you intend to make a line of size medium knees and you want each one to be just like the other, a brass template's a fine idea, or having a computer cut it is a fine idea. If you have a template for a size medium knee, but the next time you make a size medium knee, you're gonna look at it and say, well, you know, I really want it a little bit bigger, I want it a little bit taller, I'm gonna start with this, but I'm gonna add this, I'm gonna change the wing, then that brass template was a waste of time. The cardboard template serves as a reference for what you did last time, and it serves as a, you know, this is gonna get me through this project, and then serve as a reference for the next
This is
project.
an issue of repeatability, but if you're not doing
If you're not doing
another one-
repeatability, then the
And
repeatable,
also-
the durable template isn't worth doing.
It's a, which of these two people is better at visualizing three-dimensional shapes?
No, it doesn't even
I'll
come,
give
it
you a
doesn't even
hint.
come to
He's not
that.
right.
It doesn't even come to that. It's about whether or not the durable template is more valuable than just, you know, the ephemeral template. If you're gonna keep reusing the templates, you want a durable template. You know, and it could be masonite, you know, once you've got the,
How do you
Got-
trace Mason?
how do you trace it?
Same way you
Just,
trace anything else.
Like Masonite
You stick,
cabinet?
you stick,
Yeah, yeah.
you stick the scriber on the edge and you
That
go.
quarter-inch thick pressed hardboard.
Yeah.
So you like put down if you're like driving a forklift out on the carpet. that
Or
kind of
or a clipboard back. Yeah, that
Clipboard back.
material.
Clipboard back,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the really hard stuff you can't get at the home desktop, but
Yeah.
that's, you know, but that would make a great template.
Or you get the
Yeah.
plastic garage for sale signs and use that.
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
Do you think period armor manufacturers like an Osberg and Sherwood and?
Did they have templates? I don't know.
You-
That's
you
an
think-
interesting,
yeah.
that's an interesting question.
I've always wondered.
You know, I just don't
think
even
we
know.
might have found something if they did.
Where would you
Even
find
on-
it? What would your, how
And
would you
would
recognize
we
it?
have
Well,
recognized
there'd be a
it?
series of
What would it
templates
be
in
made
a
out of? It
progressive
might be steel,
movement,
it
shape,
might
and
be
design.
steel. And if it's steel,
Steel's gonna get used.
unless it fell into some conditions where it would be preserved, you know, yeah, would you recognize it? If it was a material like cardboard, it might have just returned to the earth. And if it was a material like brass, it might have gotten thrown into a melting pot when they needed a new, you know, when they were cleaning out the shop to, you know, to sell to the brazier to make, you know, lanterns or something.
Or the next year's Mongol.
Yeah, so the lack of surviving recognizable templates does not suggest they didn't use templates. On the other hand, I can't say, you know, I can't even begin to guess whether or not they did or did not.
And
I
the
suspect just
armor
like
at work engravings,
No.
anything that looks template-ish?
No, not unless the things cut out in the back of Schleisenhofer's shop lying on the floor are in fact templates and not breastplates ready to be shaped. They look like breastplates ready to be shaped, but you know, if we're right about how they're shaping breastplates, then they don't quite look like breastplates ready to be shaped, and maybe they look more like templates. But if we're right about how they're shaping breastplates, then they don't need that shape of template. So it's,
Yeah.
you know, so I don't know. The reply is hazy. Pardon me?
Which came first, chicken or the egg?
You know, it's like chicken and the egg, but after a bit, you know, they negate one another. It's not like you still have a chicken or egg, you know, but, well, okay, we're gonna do that for long.
Okay, zombie chicken and zombie egg.
Yeah.
This egg won't grow to be a chicken, but.
So, question for you.
Yeah, please.
Has there been, to your knowledge, any effort to create a chronology of the evolution of armor into details such as commenting earlier on the use of the post for a Gothic spalter as the mounting with the hinge catch pin? When did that style come in? When did it go out? And what was going on with the German lines
It
vis-a-vis
would be a
the
very
Italian
complex,
lines?
it would be a very complex,
Would be really
a
hard.
complex diagram.
Is that, just throwing this out as a tangent?
Yeah, no,
Is that something that, as the Armor Archive, if there would be interest in producing, to say, when did this mechanism come in?
Are you?
oh, I'm sure there would be, I'm sure there would be.
When did it go out?
I'm not about to
Could
do
you argue
that.
about it?
Having run a database for the FAA, but anyway, what you really need is data points in clusters. Because as soon as you have one outlier, which may or may not be an artifact of bad dating, you don't know,
Right.
then you're claiming a span that's really bogus. If you can say we have 50 hits in a 20-year period, 3 hits above it, 3 hits below it, that's a much more useful piece of information.
Right.
Which is not saying your idea is dumb, but
Yeah,
no,
the
it's just
survivorship of these objects is pretty
Well,
spotty.
obviously, there's a whole separate issue as to the reliability of data and how much confidence you can have out of the data that's available. What I was trying to direct it towards more is you often hear the comment thrown out in analyzing a piece of armor that, well, this suggests the piece could not have been earlier than this date, or it had to be
Right.
up to that date, or this
Right.
went out of style by
Right.
that time. I didn't know if there had ever been an attempt to try and catalog some of those hitch points
Codify those.
to say, as a rule, you know, the earliest piece that's ever been argued with this feature is date Y, but then you see it come in commonly after, you know,
Well,
this.
I mean, that would be a useful
actually
thing,
get
and
some-
subject to constant revision and
Oh,
argument.
constant review. You get a couple of funny things like that in Blair. He's
Yeah.
got rolls in out, he's got gussets.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, he says, you know, the gussets are normal here, but we got one 20 years earlier on some of Maximilian's stuff.
right. And, you know,
But they're
and he-
fixed,
and he-
they're not moving.
Right, and
So
he
in
gives a,
fact, he's got some of that
right.
as of 1956.
He says they're fixed, but in fact, they're not fixed. They pivot at the top and bottom and flex in the middle.
Well, okay, it means they don't have slots.
They're not
Yes.
slots, yeah, but it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
And I made that note when I wrote Toby my notes and Blair's notes and, yeah.
Yeah.
The challenge.
Well, I understand exactly what you're talking about, because that's one of the things, for those of us who have not had the opportunity to study armor to the depth that you guys have, it's very difficult for us to look at armor and learn about armor, because there's nothing written that really follows, you know, that has this information. I've learned more about armor, a lot of different armors today than I probably have over the last 2-3 years together. Even though I've done plenty of reproduction and stuff, learning these types of details adds a huge amount to my knowledge.
This will sound goofy, and there are huge exceptions to this, but memorize Blair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Step one,
It's a good
memorize
start.
Blair.
Blair's a good start.
I mean, he is.
You all own a copy of Blair, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got 4 or 5. I sold one
So
off recently.
he'll lend you some of the
Yeah,
lending
but
library.
the memorize Blair. It's got too few details in a lot of places, and it's a little
wrong in
fuzzy
some
here
other
and there.
places.
It's wrong far less often than
Then it's
any
right.
other book out there.
Yeah, it's the
How
best
about
thing
that?
going. It's the best thing going.
It's still the best thing going.
I mean,
Yes,
he's-
it's funny.
he's very dogmatic.
One of his,
European Armor,
Right.
Claude Blair, Batsford Press,
Okay.
1956 or 7, reprinting.
There are later ones, yeah.
I got a 57,
You
I
can't.
think. But anyway, it doesn't
I
matter.
think it was
Um,
originally published
mine's
in
Reprinted
Not
72,
great
don't get
cover.
the 76.
Why not?
It was reprinted in 72, that's fine, don't get the 76, they sort of Xerox the photocopy, the pictures. So, you know, start there. Is it perfect? No, of course not, it's not
Right.
perfect. There are plenty of things you can learn after that. But if you don't sort of have that as a background, you're not talking in the same game. And like I said, unlike Ashdown and Martin and, you know, pick every other book you got out there.
Fred and Lillian Funkin.
It is worth reading.
okay.
And the text, you know, usually you pick up a book and you go, the pictures, I read the pictures, they're in English, everything's great, and you ignore everything else because you really shouldn't read it. Blair's the opposite. He has very few pictures, all of them are good, but read it, memorize it, come back when you're done. Very Chinese way of learning things, you know.
Okay.
When you memorize the Bible, then we can discuss.
It's true. Blair's an excellent starting point.
You
He's the best starting point we
have
have.
a set of notes that.
Yeah.
Toby Capital is doing the next publication of Blair. He's rewriting Blair as per
Oh,
Blair's
okay.
instructions while Blair was still with us. And Toby wanted to know if there's anything about it that, you know, that I thought needed some attention. I wrote him, you know, about 10 pages of notes on Blair, which he will, you know, do with what he will when he goes to revise the next edition of Blair.
Is there any way that can be published?
Well,
for-
how
No, this is
subtle
my-
are
this is my-
these comments?
I mean, some of it's just my opinion, you know,
Well,
some of
but,
it's things like, you know, no longer in this collection, now in that collection, you know, now the late thus and so, you know,
Is
or,
there a timeline on that being reprinted?
No,
no.
I've been picking on him for about 5 years now, every time I got a chance to go buy him lunch, and it's 2 or 3 out in his project list, and somebody's gotta get him to pay for it first. So
Okay, so
it's been 5 years out for the
It's a
last
decade.
5, and
It could be a decade out.
it
I
could
hope
be
it's
3,
not.
it could be 3 years, or it could be 20. Best I can tell, his forward progress has been,
Small.
no,
The big
Um,
mistake.
And he's just waiting for things to get out of the way and somebody to pony up to promise to publish the dumb thing, and then he'll do it. But yeah, I yell about that and his English book and
Right,
every time I get a shot at it, so. He takes me in stride and goes on.
So since we can't count on Toby getting this book out, say next week,
We cannot.
No.
If we can count on it not.
Not getting it out.
then does it make sense to basically go home and reread a copy of?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And then try and draw on the proverbial collective wisdom to say, okay, let's talk and maybe do it as a topic of the month. On Spalders, what evolution did we see in Spalders over the course of a 200-year span?
It could be an interesting project. Like I say, it's going to be subject to continuous revision and sometimes acrimonious debate.
Well, I figure,
You know,
as acrimonious
yes, that is,
as it is,
or no, that is not an acceptable piece of data.
everyone can throw their data out there and then the collective
Yeah.
wisdom
Yeah.
will reach some sort
So
of
you're in charge of
consensus.
that project, is that what you're saying?
I'll take point on it,
Okay,
so.
very good, good for you. You
So-
start that. You go, guy.
Take that bullet.
But quite seriously, read Blair, look at every other picture you can find. And check, I mean, every time you're looking at something, you don't know how solid a date is.
Right.
Right, when we were flipping through the Negroli book, a whole lot of those dates are really solid. Because it says may fake it Negroli and a date on it.
That's why not solid.
That's a date.
But most other dates in armor, they're some expert, you know, real or imagined, makes his best guess. And sometimes that expert is expert and the guess is good, and sometimes it's just like somebody who's writing the catalog and they're way off base. Or, you know, sometimes it's just, it's obvious they're wrong, and sometimes it's not obvious they're wrong. But
Well,
these
they're-
dates are not necessarily true.
Yeah. There are some pieces that are cataloged as part of, you know, such and such will. There's the piece.
So, yeah, we know
So
if it is that piece, and it's always the question,
Yeah,
then we know that it existed at least as early as
yeah,
that.
as early as, you know,
At least as
it
early.
was before this.
Right, yes. Maybe the day before.
It might have been the day before, but it was before this.
Yeah. And that, you know, that's
But
a
that's,
useful piece
but
of
that's a,
information.
that's a heck of a lot better than, you
But
know,
so much,
sometime in the 15th century.
all right, but so much of what we know is based on iconography.
Yeah.
Say, well, this time of pauldron starts appearing, you know,
Durer rocks.
it starts appearing here, but then we run into the question, when that artist drew that detail, was he drawing a contemporary piece?
Yeah.
Was he
Or
drawing something
the
which was intentionally a generation and a half out of date to show his people, you know, to show his viewers that this was biblical? You know, this happened a long time ago. You know, we know that John the Baptist's head got cut off a long time ago, so.
At least 40
Yeah,
years.
at least 1430, at Grandpa's time and earlier. There's a beautiful resurrection by Hans Bolden Grin. Is that right? Is it Grin's resurrection with all the antique armor and the Roman soldiers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, he's painting this picture in 1510 or 1515 or some year like that. And there's a guy in the background, there's the soldiers at the tomb, and they're falling asleep. And the one guy's in like mid-15th century Gothic armor. The guy in the foreground has a bassinet from like 1400. He's got gauntlets which haven't seen, you know, the shiny side of 1410. He's wearing a coat armor which was, you know, out of date by 1390. And his rear braces look like they came off an effigy from 1330. You know, and there he is. He's just wearing all his old shit because he's an old guy. He's an old Roman. You know, this was a long time ago. So this doesn't tell us much.
Best
Except
before.
I've seen
Except
of the
before.
nations people using that picture.
That's right. It looks
saying,
like the Battle of the Nations guys. You know. Yeah. Exactly.
Look, I can document it, it's in this picture.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes these guys like had a historical perspective of sorts, and sometimes they just showed them and smack on modern equipment. And you know, which one were they doing? Golly, now it's connoisseurship. You know, now we gotta like understand the art, and you know,
But some of the effigies are just,
some of the
effigies are really good. 'Cause
well, and some of those
But again,
effigies,
how
some of
does
those
that
effigies were
relate
made
to
before the
reality?
death of the patron. Some of those effigies were made by his grandson. You know, I mean, take the Earl of Warwick's effigy.
It's a beautiful armor.
It's a
Which
beautiful
he could
armor.
never have worn.
But it's 40 years too late for him, because it's commissioned by put his
I don't remember which
son-in-law
one
or
it is,
something,
yeah.
you know? I think it's right, it's his son-in-law who's like trying to, like, pumping money into this project to glorify his,
Glorify the family.
the family
feature,
ancestorship.
yeah.
But basically, that armor is not the Earl of Warwick's armor, that armor is like his son-in-law's armor. You know, he's showing his own armor on his glorious wife's ancestor, his wife's glorious ancestor. You know, so it's not as straightforward as all that. You know, but at first, you know,
Yeah, I would say we're guilty of this as well, if you've ever watched Excalibur.
Yeah, well,
we're what?
We're
Excalibur.
guilty of this if you've ever watched Excalibur.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but, and.
Well, I don't count the sins of Hollywood as being mine.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not guilty of this.
I'm not guilty of that, okay?
Anyone dated from this generation that gets with these.
Oh, exactly.
Oh, wait,
exactly.
what does this have to do with articulation?
It doesn't have much to do with articulation, but you got a question on articulation. I got you on the spot now, don't I? Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was
please.
going to make kind of a comment about the idea of trying to maybe categorize and catalog, you know, these are, you know, things that you would see during this time period, and it immediately made me think of the oak shot typology for swords.
Mhm.
But this is actually a debate that, you know, I don't
Yeah,
do
is that-
armor, I'm also in spathology, and
That's a
big
great
thing-
word,
Yeah, it's a wonderful word,
Yeah.
it makes you sound educated.
doesn't it? Yeah, that's great. I never heard it before.
Yeah, spathology,
Yeah.
spathos.
Does anybody, I understand where it's from, does anybody else use that word?
It's used in the Renaissance martial arts
Excellent.
community, so. But yeah, the challenge is that
Right, are there
We
real
are-
types?
we are children, our education is based off of Enlightenment thinking. And all of this is going on, this is a very different mentality, it's almost a more holistic treatment of, you don't create things by set rote, you're really kind of producing things as they need it to be, when they need it to be. So it's hard to say, oh yes, you will never see absolutely this, and then, because I've learned the hard way, I've told people like, no, you'll never see this kind of articulation here, this is always going to be a sliding rivet, they would never have used a leather,
Yeah, but sometimes they do.
I guess I have been sometimes.
Except when they
Sometimes
did,
they
yeah.
do, yeah,
So,
sure.
but I can understand the need for there to be some sort of codification.
That, well, as I say, it will be an interesting project.
A learning
It will be an
program.
interesting project. I
Just for the
started
record, I'm
in-
not volunteering.
6 months ago or so, when a topic on the Arms and Armor Forum was about something about helmet shapes, I started to try and make a diagram which showed various features of 15th century helmets on a timeline. You know, and what I drew was like a typical helmet, and I would show, you know, three different shapes of the line of the back of the neck and head, and, you know, try and put those on a diagram, you know, between this period, this shape appears between these decades, this shape appears between those decades. But boy, it becomes a very complicated diagram. It becomes a diagram which is too difficult for this guy to figure out how, yeah, it's too many dimensions. It's too many dimensions.
Is that a selling or who, or?
I don't even, no, I don't even care, I don't
Yeah,
even care.
so
It's,
say-
you know, what is, you know,
What's that
this
shape?
line, you know, this chin versus this chin, when do you find them? Who cares what they're called, who cares what we call them, what they call them, when do they appear? But even at that, it becomes a very complicated, multi-dimensional diagram, and I haven't got the brains to figure it out.
As soon as you have more than one variable moving,
Right, right.
Yeah, things are not just coming in here, they're lifting and you know. it's-
Well, but you also have the.
Well, it's a display problem.
Right,
It's a
yeah.
display of this information problem, rather than an understanding problem. It's how you display that so it's meaningful to people.
Sure,
well, this is what you do with a database.
yeah.
Yeah, what you do with a database and produce those multi-dimensional graphs of peaks
Well,
in
how
the
you-
distance.
How you access the data is a much more evil question.
Yeah,
But you can at
hi-
least
hi-
establish multiple weird linkages in a database and keep the
difficult to do on
linkages.
paper, yeah.
But yeah, even if you've got that information, displaying it is you know, as I say, is the thing. I see you brought an articulated joint.
Yeah, and so it's something I'm working on, trying to improve, and
Okay.
I think we all end up in this kind of state where there's stuff that can be fixed and gotten better, and where would you go from there? I mean, you even touched on one thing that I kind of screwed up a little. I cut one of the lames a little too short, and there's a little gap between the lame and the fan that you can get a little bit through, so
Oh, yeah,
it's
yeah,
a little,
yeah.
little bit longer.
Right.
Always got those two on, at least for me. He's probably more precise.
too long.
Too long under the wing. Always start too long under the wing.
Oh,
Yeah, and,
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
cut it, cut it back
the,
later.
the original pattern was too long under the wing, and then I cut it too much, so.
No, it's gotta be way out there.
Okay, first of all, do you count the cop as done?
It could change.
You know, okay. You basically, you don't want to be templating, you don't want to be templating the lanes until the cop is, you're pretty much done hammering the cop. But you're not done hammering the cop, because look, we got a big old ding right there, you see it?
Mhm.
That's gotta be out of there. It's gotta be nice and smooth and clean. Now, as far as the shape of the cop is concerned, the part where these guys do not line up, but rather point to some place up here, this is good, you know, as we said, this is okay.
Is it better to have them more parallel?
In an elbow, they come to closer to parallel than they do in a knee, because a knee, the shape of the organic joint is widening through the region where the articulation has to be. By the time, but an elbow, I mean, here, in this position, yes, it's still getting wider in that place where it has to articulate, but when it's straight like this, we've come to pretty much the widest point of the elbow, because that joint, the neutral axis of the organic joint recedes into the flesh this way. So these come to be more like parallel, and certainly the wing and this part will come to be parallel, because that wing is going to just like tuck up in here good and tight. No, that's sticking out. That doesn't need to stick out, right? Okay. Bring that in, and you know it's pretty long. That's way long. You know, yeah, whack it off, sir. This could profitably be cut to here.
Okay.
You know, and it would be better for it.
I got sharp.
We're not gonna finish that.
No, it's the other side, it's too short.
Oh, yeah, under.
You know, it could profitably be cut to there. Oh, look, now you've got enough room to come across on your lanes,
I
right?
drew on it, I checked.
Oh, you meant,
But you know, by the time we get to this point right here, see, you've still got compound curvature happening. By the time we get there, it's got to be pretty flat. It should be pretty flat at that point. This is different than a knee, you know, but on an elbow, that should be pretty much flat, and this should be flat across. This compound curvature you've got right in here, you see that? By the time you get there, it should be pretty much dead flat.
Well, where does it become flat? Is it
Somewhere in this region.
Okay, where the roots are?
Somewhere in this region, yeah. But by the time you get to the root of the wing, if it's not flat, accidentally bending this wing is going to throw these guys into tension in a big way. And tension is the handmaiden of cracks.
Isn't this the one that's off the George statue that shows the really long wing on that side?
I'm not saying they never, but if we want to talk about typical, then that should be whacked off there. So I've just whacked off your strap hole. So what are we going to do about that? What's that?
Punch it deeper. That's fine.
Well, you know, if we punch it right up at the top here, the lanes might get in the way. There's no reason that hole can't be right here, nestled down in this gap, and the strap will emerge in that space, and you can make a very small elbow and still get a wide strap through there.
Oh, something we touched on is a Y-shaped strap.
That's on floaters.
That's
Yeah. I mean, you could put it on these, you know, on
Yeah,
the same pivots, but
We'll put them through the pivots.
yeah, you could.
Have you ever seen a sign of such a thing?
I've seen on three-dimensional art a suggestion that was like what was happening.
I've seen a case where it was similar to that on a leg that I own.
Yeah, okay.
But, I do not see it as a common thing by any means.
No, it's not a common thing. No, I never meant to say that it was a common thing. So here, this curvature should be like pleasantly round. In fact,
Which curvature?
when viewed here, straight on, it's like take a cross section.
The nice uniform.
It should be approaching a circle.
Okay.
If this is, I mean, is this the Black Prince?
More or less, yeah.
Okay, his time period, he might have had a turner at his elbow. If he's got a turner at his elbow, it has to be round. It has to be a part of the circle. The circle is kind of a default, you know, a semicircle is kind of the default shape for this view for an elbow cup. You know, it's a place to sort of strive for. And if you're going to have a turner, my God, you got to be there. You got to be round. The next place where there's trouble is in the first lane. And when I said this lane looked typical, you nodded, right? But you don't have this concavity on the top, do you?
Got some, it's probably not as extreme as that.
Yeah, not enough, and this distance here is,
Yours don't work.
Close it, that squeezes the whole way.
So it disappears.
it disappears.
And it sometimes does, over
That
disappears,
allows
sometimes
that
not quite all,
a little hyperextension.
but it,
Well,
Not
we don't need
necessarily.
hyperextension on the elbow, although we sometimes do have it. Just as an artifact more than a necessity. But if we cut it on these lines, yeah, if you can do that, thank you. I use just nuts and bolts to that, it's just like more convenient.
yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, it doesn't need to do that,
Doesn't need to
although
do that.
they clearly do sometimes. There we go.
But yes, as a nice goal, disappear in the center is a nice.
Pliers? Can I get pliers? No.
No.
Sorry. Does the other one come out easier?
Scissors.
I got a jeweler's slip. I can take it out.
There we go.
Just take the hammer and.
I got a
I got
hammer.
one lane on one.
Okay. Well, I mean, this hinges on the question of articulation. Nuts and bolts.
Flat.
I mean, nuts and bolts are really the way to do this for temporary assemblies.
Actually, I was wondering, I was gonna later add.
Like, what did they do?
Yeah,